Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Scruffy Movies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
Today, I made the joke to Crocker that, it's kind of like the quote in The Godfather. I believe it's The Godfather, where he says, as soon as I think I'm out, they just pull me right back in. And we thought we were out of Marvel for a little while. We thought we were going to do some other stuff, which we did one episode, not Marvel last week, but then, much like the quote from The Godfather, it yanked us right back in. They gave us a new Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, complete with in-game spoilers and a lot of very interesting fan theories bridging off of that, to the point where Crocker and I had been talking about it probably for about the past 3 days once the trailer came out. There was about 3 days there where we just talked back and forth until it got to the point where I was like, okay, we just need to do an episode on it so we can just air out all of our stuff over an hour-long period, because we're still talking about a trailer, and it's been 3 days past. So welcome to our Spider-Man Far From Home trailer breakdown, review, theory podcast. Who knows? We're back in Marvel again.
And I do want to just throw out here at the beginning as well that I have recently actually watched through Into the Spider-Verse. So we could cover a little bit of that, as well. Just while we're on Spider-Man, you never know where the conversation may lead.
Well, there is a very organic way for Far From Home to bring up the conversation of Into the Spider-Verse.
What, multiverses? Yes. Exactly. I wonder if that was a bit of foreshadowing on the animator's part. Like that's a great place for us to start with this, because this is a question I had. How tied in, I mean, obviously the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is not part of the overall MCU, but how tied in is it? Like, is it connected at all, or should it be treated as a standalone thing completely and totally? Because it just seems way too serendipitous that both plots so close together would have to do with the multiverse breaking into the MCU and the Marvel universe.
No, I mean, I definitely think it's connected, and it kind of connected itself through Venom. At the very end of Venom, the end credits tag of Venom was basically just a Into the Spider-Verse trailer, but it said before it, meanwhile in another Spider-Verse, something like that. So all of these, I mean, Spider-Verse basically confirmed that every single Spider-Man has his own place. So like the MCU is just a different branch of the Spider-Verse. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, just different branches of the Spider-Verse, that this little tiny animated movie just brought a couple of people together, but everything else is still connected. Venom, like everything is connected.
Which brings up sort of another point, which is, and I believe they've already sort of came out and said this, but will Venom really even be pulled into the MCU? Now, we've talked about this before. They threw out the joke about aliens. Obviously, when that movie was made, it was not in the greater MCU. But with all of this sort of coming together, do you foresee them maybe taking ownership of it, or maybe just putting out more movies like Into the Spider-Verse just to be sort of background and more story that explains away some of the things they just don't have time to do in sort of the overarching universe? How do you foresee all that sort of going into the future now that we're about to hit phase 4 and we've got the recent acquisition and all of that?
Well, what I think is super cool about the multiverse, and I've talked to you this off air, basically they can do whatever they want, which is super awesome. Like if in the third Spider-Man movie, they want to bring Tom Hardy's Venom over, Spider-Man and Venom have to team up to take on Carnage. Even if they have Tom Holland Spider-Man go to this other universe, and then at the end of it, he's like, wow, well, Venom, thanks for your help. Looks like you got a handle on things here. And he's like, oh, by the way, I think you're missing something. And then like touches his chest or something, and it like forms the spider across his chest. And then boom, Tom Holland's back in his universe. Venom is in his universe. So they establish them together, but it's not always in the same universe all the time. Greater things can happen in the MCU that doesn't have to affect the Venom verse, and vice versa. Venom can take on the world-ending problems over there, and you don't even have to worry about Spider-Man showing up because he's Spider-Man from a different universe. But they can still come together and do whatever they want to do. Before Supergirl was moved to the CW and they had more and more crossovers, that's basically what happened. Like, they've already established the multiverse is a thing within the Arrowverse of all the CW shows. Supergirl doesn't take place in the same universe as Arrow and The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. It takes place in its own Earth. But every time they need Kara to come over, they just open a portal to her Earth, grab her, take her back. So they've had multiple crossovers with Supergirl, and they're in two completely different Earths. So what Supergirl does doesn't affect Arrow and Flash, and the same vice versa. And that's what I'm very excited about with this multiverse theory, because they can do literally the same thing. They could have a scene where Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire, and Andrew Garfield all fight as Spider-Man together, and no one would bat an eye. We've come so far in nerdom in main pop culture.
This is true. And, that was something that I was thinking about a lot, even before our last podcast and after seeing Endgame and even before this one, is that literally anything you can come up with, anything that you want reversed, anything that you wished may have gone a different way, it is all still possible. It's all still on the table, because with, multiverses, time travel being as fluid and apparently, I don't want to say easy, but as, not necessarily butterflying affecting everything else like it could have been taken and sort of gone down that road. So with all of that, like literally anything and everything is possible. There are universes where some people die and some people don't. And if we want to decide in 5 years from now that, Tony Stark is back, they can totally do that. Now, will they? Probably not. I don't know. We'll get into that here in just a little bit, but the door is still there, available to them if they choose to walk through it.
Yeah, but that also opens the conversation of it being so easy to recast people now. Like, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark was probably the best Tony Stark that we'll ever get. But, like, 20 years into the future, they're still telling movies set in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they're like, man, we're really starting to slow down. Like, we need some fresh blood. Let's bring on a new Iron Man. Recast him, bring him in from an alternate universe. Easy. Still in the same universe. You have a new Iron Man, new character, new actor playing Iron Man. Doesn't have to be Robert Downey Jr. But, like, the possibilities are literally limitless for what they can do now if they are setting up the true multiverse.
Well, we see in the trailer for Far From Home, I believe it's Fury that says, that Mysterio, it's Mysterio, right? That's the name.
Yes. Yeah.
That he is from a world, but not our world, because the snap ripped a hole into space-time continuum or something like that. There was a fissure, however they go about saying that. So they're already moving forward with literally the very next movie is still dealing with people coming from different universes or potentially different timelines, and it all sort of stemming from what happened in Endgame, which even if we move away years down the line and maybe the effects of Endgame aren't as potent in all of the new movies coming out, it's all still there and it's all canon and it's ripe for the picking.
Yeah, plus the multiverse sets up perfectly with the new acquisition they just got of X-Men and Fantastic Four, because X-Men has always been kind of a troubled story to tell. They're hard to exist outside of their own universe because X-Men are always struggling against the government, society. Like, people don't like them because they are mutants. But that wouldn't necessarily make sense in the MCU because, as we've seen, they make like toys out of the Avengers and stuff. Like, everybody loves the Avengers. So it's hard to have these other people who are superheroes that just happen to be mutants and have society. It's hard to explain why people in society would be like, oh, you suck, but Iron Man rules. Like, it's hard to explain that. But the multiverse does it perfectly. These people could come over from a different universe, set up the entire storyline of, you're not heroes on our Earth. You're not even from our Earth. Why are you here? We don't like you. And even then they could have like the mutation spread and it starts unlocking the mutant gene within people in our MCU world who it's long laid dormant for because they were never exposed to whatever it is that makes the mutant gene flare up in somebody. And now all of these people from this world are turning into mutants. These people didn't bring over any heroes or heroic acts. They brought over a virus and they're infecting us. Nobody wants them here. You're not heroes. You're infecting us. Get out. And I think that would perfectly set up that storyline. Plus, also perfectly sets up an Avengers versus X-Men movie, which is a really awesome idea because it doesn't have to step up the villain game, but it still shows a really cool crossover between the two. And then eventually at the end of it, they figure out that they're on the same side, and you know, they have tensions against each other, but they're not going to fight each other anymore. So that leaves the Avengers to go off, do their own thing. The X-Men don't have to interfere. And then same for X-Men. They can go off, do their own thing. The Avengers don't have to interfere. So it perfectly sets up the X-Men coming in and keeping their storyline, keeping all of this stuff. Like it's so perfect that they had to have been thinking of this stuff years ago. Like, just in case we get the X-Men back, let's set up a multiverse.
Yeah, and it is uniquely convenient for the X-Men as well, for the reason you just mentioned, is because it is a gene thing. The mutation is sort of it has its own lore. So that could super easily exist in one universe and one timeline and not in another. Because like you mentioned, if that first domino did not topple in our current Earth or current universe, then we would be without, just like we're used to in the current MCU. But I love the idea of bringing them over. I don't love the idea of pitting them against one another, but we don't need to rehash the fact that Civil War is like one of my least favorite MCU movies.
Yeah,
I'm just not, I don't do well with that. I don't do well when you pit the heroes against one another.
Avengers versus X-Men was a gigantic comic event. And to be fair, story-wise, if an entire group of people that know each other that all have superpowers drop down and everybody in society doesn't like them because they came from an alternate universe and they're like, no, we're heroes, trust us, and they start stepping in and doing all this stuff, the Avengers are probably going to fight them.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt that it's a huge event, and it's more than likely the way it will go, just so they can set up a future movie where they all have to work together, just like we've already seen in the past. I mean, if it's a good formula, I don't want them to even step away from it. I want them to continue making awesome movies that they know will work. But if we could do it a little bit differently, I don't know. I would have to see the options. Like, if the options were have very few X-Men, just like have Wolverine and maybe a couple other ones here or there, and roll them into actually being an Avenger or however they go about doing that. If the option is have few X-Men that are actually just full-fledged Avengers, or all of the X-Men in what is basically their own universe that is just crossing over with the MCU and it all comes to a head in a big battle movie, then I'll certainly go with the latter. Like, you know, but at the same time, if there's a way to have my cake and eat it too, then that's the route I'm going to go. I just don't even know what that would look like.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it coming from a person that's seen a lot of movies, it just makes so much sense story-wise to have that be one of the next Avengers movies. Like, it just makes so much sense. You set up the X-Men, you make it so that the X-Men are siloed away from the Avengers. You don't have to get the entire 20-team group in with the Avengers every time there's any kind of event. You can cross over like Wolverine and people. There's just so many things that an Avengers versus X-Men movie would set up and make the correct decision story-wise moving forward. That's just the only way I can see it going.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for the X-Men universe, the cinematic universe, to be standalone, like on its own. And that way we get to have loads of awesome movies with lots and lots of mutants and telling the story and looking at the past and the future and everything else like we're used to. But they come together in a multiverse crossover where you basically have the MCU and then you have like the XCU, and every 5 years we get one giant movie where they cross streams with one another. And those are the multiverse movies. Like, I think you could do a lot with that, but like how much room is there still in the world for a brand new cinematic universe? Like, Marvel is just so established and they can do no wrong at the moment. I 100% believe it would be a wise choice, business-wise, to just continue along with the MCU like everybody's planning on happening. But if we could spin up another universe that is just as spot on as the MCU, and it'd be the XCU or whatever, then you would get my money for sure.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of what we were saying with Venom crossing over with Spider-Man. Like, they could do something like that. And plus, that keeps the door open for all of these, kind of like what we were talking about with Iron Man a little bit earlier. Apparently, the rumor is they're recasting everybody in X-Men with the exception of Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. Super easy. Bring Deadpool from his X-Men universe over to our universe. He's the only person that ported over from that universe, and he spends his entire first MCU movie pretending like he's like this big, awesome hero that saved all these people and like all this stuff. Plus, he could come to this world and find out it's like a PG-13 world and start making fun of that. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, you can't say the F word here a lot. And they're like, yeah, they're like, what? I mean, you can. And he's like, no. This is a PG-13 world. And just like make a lot of jokes like that. Like, it answers so many questions that previously seemed unsolvable. I was like, how are they going to introduce the X-Men? There's no easy way. Like, oh, now all of a sudden, like, the mutants just pop up, like, that's been in the MCU. Like, that would suck. I wouldn't like that story. Like, it just answers so many questions. Plus, Fantastic Four, which we haven't really touched on yet, Ultimate Fantastic Four, they get their powers by going into an alternate dimension and being infected. And then they come back and they all have their powers. So who's to say Reed Richards and Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm haven't already existed in our universe, and they go to explore this rip in space that the snap caused. They go into it, get infected, and come back as the Fantastic Four. It answers so many questions.
And especially now that we have people from the MCU that are apparently living long lives in alternative timelines or alternative universes. I mean, what's going on with Captain America for the rest of his life as he's living it out with his sweetheart? You know, I would like to think he still probably is a bit active. I mean, obviously probably not living a superhero lifestyle, because in theory you probably shouldn't even be interacting with the world unless, which I guess he's in a safe timeline if it's his own personal timeline, really, at that point. But he could easily come across someone through that entire lifetime. Say he comes across the Fantastic Four, because in their world, instead of the rip in time that brings all of these universes together being Thanos' snap or all of the snaps, maybe their rip in time to keep with a consistency came from the Fantastic Four. And then he goes, oh, well, you know what? I know the folks you guys need to team up with. I mean, we have basically someone that's already tromping around in an alternative timeline at the moment that could at any point be leveraged to connect the dots.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it's the same thing I said whenever they got the Infinity Gauntlet, but now that we've seen that story played out, when they had the Infinity Gauntlet, I was like, oh, they just set up, they can do anything they want. Snap and the X-Men are there. They can do anything. But now that the Infinity Gauntlet is gone, but they're still setting it up to where they can do anything, is such a smart move on their part, because they can bring X-Men, they can do Fantastic Four, they can show Cap going from like the alternate timelines and all this stuff. Like, they can literally do anything because they've established there is a multiverse now. It is present in the MCU. And it can cross over anywhere, anytime. Like, you can see anybody pop up and they can just go, oh, multiverse. Like, it's so easy.
Well, they've given themselves a safety net forever. Yeah, like we've talked multiple times, and Venom was a great example of this. Like, all we need is that one line to like answer that question or give the why behind something. And in Venom, it was like the one just quippy little line about aliens. And obviously, if they had lived through all of the events that the MCU had gone through up until that point, that comment would have never been made, especially not that way. And with the Infinity Stones and the Infinity Gauntlet and all of the abilities they have still today, that is all you need. We no longer need those like outs and those explanations. because all they have to do is be like, oh, you remember the snap? Oh yeah, that also did this. We just didn't we just didn't realize it until right now,
Yeah, and like it can become almost like a joke later, like in a different movie, like in Doctor Strange 3 or something. He's having to fight somebody and he looks like at Wong or something and he just points at the giant monster and he's like, multiverse? And Wong's just like, multiverse. And then they hop in and start fighting it. Like they set up so much stuff. And if they explain it properly in Spider-Man, which it seems like they're going to do, that's literally all the explanation they're going to need for any future movie, whatever they do. They can just go, oh, multiverse, and then keep the movie going. Nobody's going to question it.
Yeah. Now, one question I have about superheroes now, and based off of what we see in the Spider-Man trailer, getting back to that a little bit, and sort of the events of past MCU movies, it seems that our heroes like to bounce back and forth between being saviors of the world and then like wanted by all government organizations and being on the run and house arrest and everything else. And were the events of Endgame enough to basically make right all of the bad things the heroes have done in the past, so that now they're kind of buddy with the cops? Because Spider-Man actually looks at a couple of cops when they ask him if he's the new Iron Man, and he says he's too busy doing their job, and they laugh and he walks away, which makes me think he's definitely not like a wanted person at this point, especially not someone that would, be on house arrest or anything like that we've seen from the others. So did I miss something? Did they ever explain that away, or are we just sort of moving on?
The only people that were ever really in trouble were Cap's crew. And I guess after half the universe disappeared and they helped everybody come back, the government was probably like, yeah, you're not so bad.
You get a one out on this one.
Yeah, but it was only Cap's crew from Civil War that ever gotten like any trouble really with the law. Nobody else has.
Okay. No, that makes sense then. And I guess half of them are freaking gone.
Yeah, I mean, they really are. And so, Clint, technically, and Scott both served their time. Like, they were the ones that were put on house arrest. The other people just took off, which really now would just be Falcon and Bucky. And I guess they're just like, hey, you know what? You guys are cool. You helped save the universe. You're good now.
Talking about moving forward and all of that, you just mentioned Clint and Ant-Man. God, I've already forgotten his first name. Scott. So they both have children that I believe in the comic books take up the reins at some point. We saw Hawkeye's daughter hit a bullseye, and then we've got Baby Stark, which I also believe ends up being someone somewhere at some time. So could we like subliminally be setting up a generation past where we're currently at the moment? Like, if they are still making these movies in 10 years from now, 20 years from now in the same universe, could we see those three actually, reprise the name?
Maybe. I know specifically for Iron Man, there's a big theory going on because there is a new Iron Man in the comics, and I believe she's called Iron Heart. But a lot of people think that Shuri, T'Challa's sister in Black Panther, is going to take up that mantle and be Iron Heart. And then there's also another theory, which it isn't really a theory. It's mainly the kid from Iron Man 3. Somebody asked him a question, and he was like, oh, yeah. But it's for lack of a better term, it's basically like Iron Man Jr., and his name is Iron Lad. And they asked him if he would want to be Iron Lad, and he was like, oh, yeah, for sure. So I think eventually we will see kind of some recycling, and especially even with Hawkeye, his Disney Plus show is rumored to be there's a girl named Kate Bishop that's running around killing bad guys claiming that she's Hawkeye. So Clint Barton has to come out of retirement again to go track her down and be like, hey, you're not Hawkeye. Stop killing these people and saying you're Hawkeye. You're getting me in a lot of trouble. And then he ends up training her to actually be the new Hawkeye, and she takes up that mantle. So, I mean, there's definitely set up for a lot of continuation of names and family lines and things like that going into the future.
Yeah, it just seemed seemed like a lot of little ones. And usually when that happens, it's because they are setting something up, which I know that, you know, at least a couple of them, or shoot, all three of them, that was a big part of like their story and why they needed to survive or didn't or whatever. But it just seemed way too convenient that there were three young ones, and I believe in the comics, most of them end up doing something at some point, be it good or ill.
Well, I mean, there's so many. Marvel's so good at just seeding in those like little tiny things like that. Once they got the rights back to Spider-Man, there's a scene in Iron Man 2 where a kid who's wearing an Iron Man helmet raises his fist at one of the Sentinels that Whiplash has made,
Yeah,
and Iron Man drops down and blows it up. And then after they got the rights back to Spider-Man, Kevin Feige was like, yeah, that was Peter Parker. We were putting it in there in the hopes that we would get Spider-Man back. That kid was definitely Peter Parker. He was always meant to be Peter Parker. And everyone was like, are you serious? So like it already established the Iron Man Peter Parker relationship, which we see play out through Civil War, Homecoming, Infinity War, and Endgame. So like they set that up in 2010, and they didn't even get the rights back till like 2014, 4 years later. So they're just, and I mean, if they never got the rights back, then, oh, what? Yeah, that was just a kid at a show that was standing up for what he believed in. Like they're so smart at seeding in little things like that to enrich storylines for people who keep up. Like I'm sure that they've seeded in all that stuff just to be like, yeah, if it comes down to it in the future, for sure. Like super easy. That's what we were always meaning to do. But that's why they've put in like 5 or 6 different ones where you don't know what direction they're going to take, because they're like, we'll just see how we're feeling. And if the story leads to Ironheart, we'll go that way. If the story leads to Iron Lad, we'll go that way. And so they're just so smart about doing that and just putting in those little tiny subtle things that it's almost unnoticeable at this point, that you're just like, okay, yeah. And then when it sets up for its own movie, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I remember they did that in this. Like it's just those, oh yeah, that makes sense type moments.
And there's a lot of hot potato that happens with the creation of new branches and bits and pieces of the universe too. I mean, one of the sort of one of the big points that the Russo brothers made, sort of wrapping up after Endgame, is that yeah, it looks to us as the fans that they're setting up Thor to be in the next Guardians, and they're doing this over here and that over there. But they basically say that every choice they made as far as movies that are already scheduled to come next and what those characters are up to, they leave it 100% for the most part up to that director. And if they want to, pick something up and run with it, great. If not, that's cool. If they have a plan and they can communicate about it with one another, which Marvel has traditionally been really great at doing, then they can sort of do certain things to play into that hand a little bit better. But at the end of the day, all of or most of these stories are being written by different individuals and being directed by different individuals. So that just goes, I guess, into the greater compliment that you have to give Marvel, which is just their ability to look into the future and put those little things in there. Do the kid with a mask in hopes of, one day getting it back, but also just having good people that are driving the ships that folks can trust and that communicate with one another, so that we end up with this. But it is a lot more scattered than one would be led to believe. I mean, there's not like one super geek held up in a room somewhere, like writing the master script and plot of all of these movies,
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's also like Marvel doesn't make any bad decisions when it comes to that kind of stuff, because they know who they're bringing on when they bring them on. And like when they bring them on, they're like, hey, this is kind of the story we want you to tell. You take it your creative direction, but it needs to hit point A, B, and C. Other than that, do whatever you want. But A, B, and C, it has to hit. And so then people go and write the story around A, B, and C, because Kevin Feige and all of the Marvel executives are so good at planning out into the future. Like they knew what Captain Marvel's A, B, and C was going to be before they made that movie. So when they brought the screenwriters in, they were like, hey, A, B, C, other than that, do whatever you want. And so they just wrote a script, but surrounded it with the plot points of A, B, and C, and then they can make whatever movie they want. They just have to make sure to include these little things.
Yeah, they said they approached Thor about being Fat Thor when he was still like shooting Ragnarok. So he was all like super jazzed on like new kind of Thor, like kind of more comedic than usual type of thing. And he was just willing to go along with whatever they said. And that's been, quite a while. Oh, what does that sound mean?
That sound means it's halftime. Woo woo. So for anybody who hasn't listened to the show before, halftime is the part of the show where Crocker and I take a break from the conversation that we're having. We talk about recent movies we've seen, movie news, trailers we're excited about. It's also been the part of the show where we've been giving away our digital copies. We're also going to continue to do that this week, and we're going to be giving away another sequel, one that I recently rewatched and liked it a lot more the second time than I did the first time, is going to be Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. And that one is a really good one. Like I said, if you saw it once in theaters, it's due for a rewatch because I rewatched it and enjoyed it a lot more than I did in theaters. But if you want to enter to win that free digital code, all you got to do is comment the code word Pratt below or direct message me at Scruffy Movies on Instagram. Again, the code word is Pratt, P-A-R-T-T, and you'll be entered to win a free digital copy of Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom.
P-A-R-T-T?
Yeah, Chris Pratt.
It's not P-R-A?
What? Chris Pratt? No.
Or, well, you said P-A-R, not P-R-A.
What did I say?
I think you got it backwards, but
I said P-A-R-T-T?
Yes.
Oh, well, P-R-A-T-T. It's not a spelling contest. I'll know what they mean if they meant
That's what I was about to say. I think the good folks out there on the interwebs know what you mean. I'm
glad that you brought that up, though, because if I did misspeak and I got a million messages from people that just were spelling it part, I'd be like, man, what did I sound like, part or something?
All right, should I go first for halftime?
Yeah, go for it.
So I don't have a whole lot on my list for this week, but I am super excited about a comedy series. Well, it looks kind of like an action comedy series that is supposed to be hitting Prime, I think, tomorrow, either today or tomorrow, called Good Omens. And I've mentioned this a long time ago during halftime when we first got some trailers for it, but it looks a lot like an angel demon buddy comedy. Some circumstances have come where the end is nigh, and I think they've lost their antichrist or something like that. So basically an angel and a demon have to work together, and it's called Good Omens, only on Prime, and it looks really good.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I have not seen the trailer or anything for it, though. I've seen like images and stuff because we watch TV from a Fire Stick, so they've been like hyping it up. So I've seen images and stuff, but never like the full trailer.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for like a good buddy comedy or duo action movie or anything like that. So with the inherent duality of angels and demons, I feel like this should be a pretty good one.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, and definitely the biggest news that I've gotten in the past week or two is that we now have dates for the next 3 or at least 3 more Star Wars movies. And that's going to be end of year 2022, 2024, and 2026.
Yeah, and they said starting in 2021, Avatar and Star Wars will hand off Christmas season sequels until like 2027 or something like that. So it'll be Avatar, Star Wars, Avatar, Star Wars, Avatar, Star Wars.
Which I'm excited about. And just because I absolutely have to, because it is impossible for me to mention this and not mention what I'm about to say, I hope so badly that this is a trilogy. I know they kind of want to move away from that as well, but I hope so badly that this is a trilogy done by the Game of Thrones guys and not that loser that directed episode, what was it, 8? His name, Johnson.
Rian Johnson.
Yes. I hope it's not him, although there has been no official word on whether or not his movies are moving forward or canceled or what. He posted a tweet or something not very long ago, it's been within a couple of months, that said everything is still moving forward as planned. But I just find that really, really, really hard to believe after episode 8.
I do as well. After the absolute division that episode 8 caused within the fan base, I don't know why anybody in their good sense would give that guy another movie, especially another trilogy of movies. Whether you liked episode 8 or not, you can look at the divide, the absolute divide it caused, and be like, oh, probably don't want to do that again to the Star Wars fandom.
I agree. Now, what would be cool is, and this is a long shot, because they do want to move away from the trilogy thing, is to honestly sort of kick up their own universe. Now, this would be a bit more tricky potentially, because so many Star Wars stories happen over a humongous timeline. So if they were going to have different directors doing handfuls of movies here and there, and maybe it's not all the Game of Thrones guys, none are Rian Johnson, but maybe they bring some other folks in, they at least will probably need to have the understanding of it's going to focus on, these individuals mainly during this era with this one or two main bad guys or something like that. So there would need to be some communication there. But if we could get an actual Star Wars universe spun up like the MCU cinematic universe, like sort of moving past the age of the trilogies and really wrapping things up here with episode 9 before they move forward, I would be game for that. But I feel like it's a safer bet to continue doing trilogies and then to just have anthology movies that are literally free reign to explore any date period, any little dark nick and corner of history in the universe,
Yeah, I agree. I would like for them to move more into the latter myself. Just like, if you need 3 movies to tell a story, you get 3. If you need 5, you get 5. If your movie only takes 1, awesome. If it's a 2-parter, great, 2 movies. But just like smaller stories told over a tinier scale than it took like 40 years to tell the episodes.
That's true. Yeah, but I also think that we're living in a time now where those movies would have come quicker. Like, if A New Hope dropped in 2010, then we could be, 9 years later, almost at episode 9 still. Like, that's how fast things move nowadays compared to in the 70s. And then especially in the 80s.
We no longer live in a society where you have to wait and see if the movie is profitable before you make the next one. We live in a society where somebody doesn't pitch just one movie and then go, and I have ideas for sequels if this one does good. People go in and pitch like 7 movie arcs, and studios give them the budget for 7 movies, and then they just shoot them all back to back. We're not living in the days of society anymore where people are just like praying and hoping that one does good so they can really fulfill their vision. They go in with like, okay, I want to make 10 movies, and here's the spinoff TV series. Here's the animated kids series that's going to air on ABC Saturday mornings for the children about this series. And here's some potential toy ideas and streaming rights that I think that we can get access to. Like, they go in pitching a franchise now. They don't go in just pitching a movie.
Yeah. And, I always bring it up, but also back in those days, it would literally take 6 to 18 months before it would come out on VHS, somewhere in that like time frame. So if you did not see a movie in theaters, you might not see it for a year.
Yeah.
And we just don't live with those repercussions anymore. People, even if they opt out of going to the theater, they know that within 2 months, they'll be able to catch up and be a part of the conversation everyone else is a part of.
Yeah, and it almost re-sparks the conversation now. Being able to see it on like digital or Blu-ray or however you watch it, it re-sparks the conversation. People get re-interested in stuff that they kind of lost interest in over the past 2 months. It re-sparks it, and it gets it going again.
Awesome. Well, what do you have down for your halftime?
Okay, so a couple things. Number 1, there's a horror movie series called The Collector, and it has a sequel called The Collection. Apparently, there was always a 3rd one that they wanted to make, but they never were able to, and now apparently it is on its way. They found the funding or whatever. I don't know how far into production they are. They released a poster for it, so that's awesome, but people have technically released trailers before they shot the movie, so you can't really be foretold from just a poster, but very excited about that one. I saw a new trailer for a Netflix movie coming out called Rim of the World, which is basically about this group of kids who are at a camp called Rim of the World, and they go off by themselves when aliens attack. So they get back to camp. Camp's been decimated by these aliens. And so they ride into the city to try and get help. City's also been decimated. They find this like military unit that's moving through. The military unit gets absolutely destroyed by aliens. But before the leader of the military unit dies, he looks at this little like 10-year-old kid and he goes, you have to take this to this place, and hands him like a hard drive. But they look up the place and it's 70 miles away, and they're on bicycles, and they're like, how are we going to get there? So it's these 4 or 5 kids from about like 10 to 13 having to travel across the country, dodging aliens and like all this crazy stuff happening in order to save the world. And that seems very interesting.
Sounds like a very typical zombie plot. We're here, the antivirus is here, we have everything in our way between New York and LA or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's unique. It just looks interesting.
Oh no, I know. I'm just pointing out the obvious fact that it doesn't sound very unique.
Yeah.
But any good sci-fi movie or action or anything like that even if they reuse the same premise, I mean, there are many people out there that say there's only 14 stories that have ever been told or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's much less than that. It's like 4 or 5, maybe.
Yeah.
We also got some reactions. Some summer movies that I'm very excited about have started to show a little bit early. John Wick 3 has been getting awesome reviews. People are absolutely loving John Wick 3, so that's great. I was very excited for that one. But then more exciting to me, Godzilla King of the Monsters has been getting some amazing reviews. I saw one in particular that said it learned from the predecessor everything that people wanted to see about a Godzilla movie and upped it to 100. They were like, it's pure summer movie fun. See it on the biggest screen with as many people as you can. Otherwise, you won't enjoy yourself nearly as much. So that's awesome to hear.
I want to pause you right there and say this live on air so that we have to eventually do it. I want to actually sit down and do a podcast on the Dark Universe and the Monsterverse completely and totally.
Why did you bring that up when I was just talking about Godzilla?
Well, he's part of the Monsterverse.
Oh, I got confused with the Dark Universe, with the Dooku, the Dark Universe Cinematic Universe.
Oh, well, I just really want an excuse to talk about the Dark Universe, and the Monsterverse sounds like a good segue because right now there's only, 3 movies with this one in the Monsterverse, and then
2
versus Godzilla.
Yeah, well, technically 3, yes. With there's been Godzilla, Kong Skull Island, and then now Godzilla King of Monsters, and then there will be Godzilla versus Kong next year.
Right. So it'll be 4 in total by then. But we could probably do an entire podcast on why I'm just upset that the Dark Universe is not doing better than it is.
No, it'll just be 3 by then. Godzilla, Kong, and then the next Godzilla.
Right.
Or you saying Godzilla?
But we know that there's a 4th one on the horizon. That's already been slated.
Yeah, I got you. I see what you're saying. And then finally, and most exciting, the It Chapter 2 trailer dropped, and it was amazing. And I've said it before, we talked about it on our It podcast. I have never liked the adult story as much as I like the kids. The old It miniseries used to come on a 2-part tape. Part 1 was the kids' story. Part 2 was the adults. I would never even watch part 2. I didn't care. Once it got done with the kids, great. Movie's over for me. Like, I just didn't care. And so going into this chapter 2, I was very much of the feeling like they're really going to have to prove to me that I need to care about these adults and that this looks like an interesting movie, because the kids are always going to be more interesting to me. I'm a big fan of like coming of age stories and like kids having to take on monsters. Like, I'm just a big fan of that. So the adults never really, it's just adults fighting a monster. I don't care that much. But this trailer blew me away, made me immediately excited. And it shows kind of like a little bit of a clip at the beginning, and then almost the last minute of the 3 minutes that it is the trailer. But the scene that they showed, it freaked me out. I got goosebumps from it. Like, it scared the crap out of me. And it wasn't even like jump scares or anything. It was just horror. It was tension, not knowing what was going to happen. And then they play with your emotions. Like, you know something's going to happen. You just don't know when. And it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And then eventually it does happen and it still freaks you out. So the Andy Muschietti, who did part 1 and now is doing part 2, The only other movie I've seen come from him is the movie Mama, which is also an amazing horror movie. So he just seems like he's got the horror genre down. Like he just seems like he knows what he's doing. And also now with all of these new actors coming in to play the characters from It, the original kids, it seems like I'm going to care more about these adults because the trailer looked interesting. It looked just like a good movie, but also it has a lot of actors in it that I really like. And I'm really interested to see what they do with it. And Pennywise, of course, Bill Skarsgård, who when they cast him, I was like, nobody's going to live up to Tim Curry Pennywise. Nobody. And now I'm like, Tim Curry who? This guy absolutely blew it out of the water, and I can't wait to see what he's like taking on adults and trying to get them to remember their childlike fear of him. I think is going to be a very interesting concept, and it's made me extremely excited. It's one of the movies I'm looking forward to most this year.
Yeah, I feel like I'm messing up because you told me 3 days ago that the trailer was out and it was awesome, and I still have not seen that trailer.
Yeah, you got to watch it. It's crazy good.
I expect these things to be like served to me on YouTube in a timely fashion. Sometimes the algorithms just don't work in our favor.
Yeah, it looks incredible. It looks very, very good. And that's it for me for halftime this week.
All right. So where should we take it now? Do you have anything that you want to cover? Maybe left over from Endgame leading into Far From Home?
Not necessarily in game, but there was one very interesting Far From Home theory I talked about, and I know you and I were kind of divided on this a little bit, so I figured we could go ahead and jump into this conversation. Peter, it shows in the new trailer, is putting on Tony's glasses from Infinity War, taking them off and going like, oh man, or something along those lines. He seems very shocked. And what if somebody's like, what if Tony created an AI of his consciousness, put it in those glasses, and Tony becomes Peter's new Jarvis, more or less. He takes over the voice in Peter's suit, and he's still there guiding him, giving him tips and all this stuff. And I was all for it. I was like, yes, that sounds amazing. Awesome way for Robert Downey Jr. to keep making money, but he doesn't have to come back and be on set or do anything. Again, he could just hop into a recording booth. Also gives the Spider-Man story more oomph because he is still being taught by Tony Stark technically, which is still really cool. That's awesome for him. We see in the trailer that the Tony Stark thing is going to be basically his big writing point throughout the movie. At least what they want us to believe now is that it's going to be. So having that kind of come full circle and him saying something along the lines of, I can't do this without Tony, and then having Tony there, I think is probably going to end up being, if it is true, it might not be, the big like push he needs to take down Mysterio and the elementals in the movie. And I know you had a little bit of issue with that.
I just think that would be too much. To have Tony truly there in like his consciousness in Peter's ear would be too much. Like we can't go through what we just went through in Endgame and then he basically still be there but not be there. Like to me, I'm totally fine with, you know, I knew the day was going to come where I wasn't going to be here for you. So I recorded this, 6-hour long dissertation on how the suit works and all my advice and what you should do to maintain harmony between the Avengers and, don't go to space without your sunscreen type of stuff. Like I would be okay with that. But I think to get a true like Jarvis / Vision style consciousness upload, it's too much. We've already said goodbye. And I feel like that's sort of a cheaty way to keep him around. And unless they somehow, again, kind of like the pre-recorded tape idea, unless they drastically limit it to this one movie where, Peter Parker gets what he needs. He gets that he takes that leap of faith, and he truly falls into his role as Spider-Man. And then from there, he can stand, he can bootstrap himself. He can stand up on his own 2 feet, and he doesn't need Tony. So therefore, the consciousness is no longer part of the equation. I just feel like it would be a bit too heavy-handed. It would be a little too much.
Okay, I can agree with that. I see your point of view more now than than I did. And I also think that that's a very good story point that they could potentially do. Like, we're at Tony's like will reading or something like that, and he gives Peter just his glasses, and Peter's like, great, these glasses, what am I supposed to do with these? Like, this guy came in and he was like a father figure to me, and now he left me with a pair of glasses. Awesome. It's good to know I meant so much to him. And so for a lot of the movie, he's trying to live up to Iron Man to prove that he's better than Iron Man or something like that. Like, he's hurt by what Tony did. And then eventually when he does put on the glasses, inside of the glasses, Tony has left him a message that's just for him, telling him like that he loves him and he knows that he can be whatever the hero is that the world needs. Something like that like amps him up. And then he's like, he realizes that Tony left him these glasses for a reason. He didn't record anybody else any of these personalized messages. This was just for Peter. And so he takes the glasses off, and then that's what gives him the final, like, I can do it, and goes after Mysterio. So I'm fine with that now. Yeah. I wasn't understanding your entire point whenever we were talking about it through text, but now I get what you're saying more.
Yeah. And I also, like, this also makes me just really want to go refresh myself on the history of Vision and Jarvis and all of that too. But I don't think there's any way you can slice it in the current situation of the universe, because you've already built in a net with literally being able to make any decision you want, like we've talked about with the branching timelines and the multiverse theory. That would just be too much. That would be way too much of a psych. He's not really gone. He's still a main character in the movie. You just don't see him. You only hear him. You know?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I'm more in line now with the, like, he recorded Peter a message or something, and like that's his final goodbye to Peter. I'm fine with that.
You know, one thing I do like to see in any trailer is more of Nick Fury, because if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, and that's one of my favorite parts of Captain Marvel, though it had its issues, is that it looks like Fury will be playing a real hands-on role in this movie. And I just love me some Nick Fury, man. I feel like we don't get enough of him. Same goes with Happy. I love that since Iron Man now has slowly been sort of sunsetted over a while, and we're getting Happy and Nick Fury back into some screen time with the Spider-Man series, because he's been just as there in the Spider-Man movie as he was in some of the Iron Man movies. I feel like Happy in particular. And then just here recently, with the exception of, I forget the other Avengers movie that had a lot of Fury in it. But other than those few, we don't really see them as often as I would like.
Yeah, especially Happy Hogan. I feel like he's the kind of like uncle that doesn't want to take care of the kid, kind of like Iron Man did want to take care of Peter. Happy feels almost obligated into it, but it seems like in this movie they're going to have a much better relationship. And I agree with you. Like, the more Happy that we saw in the trailer, even the little in tag that we got of him actually going to be coming to Europe to try and help Peter out, and it looks like he's going to be stuck there and having to actually help Peter, was awesome. I'm always more excited for more Happy. And I did see another interesting fan theory that said at the beginning of the trailer, the Nick Fury calling Peter was the real Nick Fury, and he was warning him that Mysterio was in Europe and not to trust him. Once Peter gets to Europe, the Nick Fury and Maria Hill and everybody he sees there is just an illusion by Mysterio. Those aren't the real people.
Ooh, interesting. Because Mysterio is an illusionist, right? That's his jam.
Yes, and he is a bad guy, but they have been playing him in the trailers nothing but a good guy.
Yeah, he will end up being a bad guy. He has never been anything but a bad guy.
Yeah, people are very curious how they're going to spin that. And it seems like that would be a very plausible way for them to go of, well, how could he be a bad guy and all these people trust him? How could he trick all of these people? He didn't. They're not real.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I haven't heard many interesting theories as good as that one, for sure. But that would make a lot of sense based on the little tiny itty bit of screen or film that we have seen so far. That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it said people were surmising basically that Mysterio's plotline is going to be almost like Syndrome in The Incredibles. He's creating the elementals himself, which is the people that they're going to have to fight, Hydro Man and Fireman and all these people like that. He's creating them so that he can take them down and be like the next Iron Man, like the new hero on the block. And that's like his end game is he's going to defeat them and then he's going to be the new hero. But then, of course, Peter or somebody finds out that he is the real person that's behind all of this. He's like actually the villain, and then that's how he ends up turning.
Yeah, I could see that as well, sort of trying to come in and fill the void.
Right.
And just leverage the convenience of the situation Earth has been going through for the past 5 years.
Right, because it's also super smart from a multiverse level. People on his universe already know he's a villain. He comes into this universe and is like, oh, they need a new hero? No problem. And he becomes the hero even though he's really not.
Makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. And then this will hopefully set up a Sinister Six movie that we'll get for Spider-Man 3.
Ooh.
Because we saw that the Falcon didn't die, and now we've set up Mysterio. Also, there was the Shocker, which I don't believe was dead. I think Ned just netted him to the bus. They've set up the Prowler, which is another Into the Spider-Verse character. So, I mean, they're setting up a lot of people. Basically, all they need is like a Norman Osborn Green Goblin, and they mostly have the Sinister Six already introduced and ready to go.
This is true. Do you mean to say the Vulture?
Who did I say?
Falcon.
Yes.
I'm calling you out today, bro.
I know, I'm messing up. Yeah, the Falcon as played by Chris Part.
Yeah, it's played by Chris Part. Awesome. Well, there's a lot that I'm looking forward to in the Spider-Man movie, and I'm glad that they didn't necessarily rush out a trailer, but I mean, this is the first trailer I've ever seen, and maybe I just don't keep up like I should, where they legitimately start the trailer with one of the actors sitting there in like street clothes saying there is about to be massive spoilers for a movie that's currently in theaters. If you have not seen that movie, do not watch this trailer yet. Go watch that movie and then come back. But I think for all of us that had seen Endgame, it was very nice to actually get more of an understanding sort of where this movie's going to go. Because I know that's what you and I were talking about a couple of podcasts ago before that movie or that trailer dropped or Endgame dropped, where we were like, well, it's sort of strange that they're wrapping up, the end of a big phase, but they've kind of done it before this way where they sort of ease you out and fill in some of the blanks and close some of the story that might still be hanging open, and to sort of see that this is legitimately going to be taking place after the events of Endgame and that it isn't some rearranged time movie like we've seen before. I appreciate that from the Marvel folks for giving the fans something like that to sink our teeth into immediately.
Yeah, it's the epilogue. It like Endgame was the conclusion of the story, but this is the nice little wrap up that we get where it answers a lot more of the big picture questions that we had, and it kind of leads us off to like, and this is what the future is going to be without necessarily taking us there yet.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's
what they do.
Yeah, I like that.
Awesome. Well, is that as good a spot as any?
Yeah, I think that's about as good a spot as any. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Scruffy Movies podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. What did you think about the Spider-Man trailer? Let us know below. Again, if you want to enter to win the free digital copy of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom starring Chris Part, please enter the code word Pratt below. I almost said Part again on YouTube, on the YouTube video you're watching right now, or direct message me at Scruffy Movies on Instagram. Again, the code word is Pratt. Please follow us on Instagram at Scruffy Movies.
And Crockalicious.
And thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you all next week.